Resto Druid testing. I'll be honest with you, I was really excited. I am really excited to start Resto Druid because I don't think Resto Druid is really losing anything and they're gaining a whole lot, and considering that some of their legendaries are really overpowered. And today we're going to be testing that you may Lifebloom 2 targets and Lifebloom's final healing is increased by 200%. And this from the initial testing is working with photosynthesis. So that means if I keep Lifebloom on myself, my periodic heals, other periodic heals, or all the periodic heals heal for 20% faster. And if I keep Lifebloom on the tank, the more hots I have on the tank, the higher chance I have a proc, or the higher chance I have to proc Lifebloom Bloom. So more single target. So Lifebloom on myself, more AoE healing or faster heals. Lifebloom on the tank, more single target healing. Combine the two, you have pretty giga healing overall. I'll be completely honest with you, the whole Swiftman thing, it's probably the biggest change that I've seen. So you can't Swiftman the target unless they have a hot on them, like Rejuve and things like that. This has been pretty hard to get used to, if I'm being very honest. Because generally speaking, like right now, I Swiftmanned, it removes rejuvenation, I'm going to Trank as well. There's a lot of damage happening here. This guy has a debuff here. We need to keep Lifebloom on myself, we need to keep Lifebloom on the tank. We're gonna use Regrowth on this, we're gonna spam Regrowth, Swiftman is available. I can't use Swiftman on the Hunter because it doesn't have Regrowth, it doesn't have a hot on them, so you know what I mean. I'm also using Soul of the Forest because, again, Swiftman cooldown is 15 seconds. So there is a chance that Swiftman and Soul of the Forest might make a comeback, especially considering that you only have around 10% mastery at this point. So it'll be very interesting to see because Swiftman cooldown is lower. I'm also running, that I haven't really showcased you, Adaptive Swarm. I am Necrolord Master. And I have Fleshcraft, which is pretty cool. It's pretty cool. I didn't get to use it here fully. But look at this, I use Adaptive Swarm. It's basically kind of like a hot. You can see he has 3 stacks right now. It's kind of like a hot that jumps from target to target, and it can DPS targets or it can heal targets. And it also increases your periodic heals or DPS. So your Moonfire, Sunfire, and all of your hots, your healing. So it's so adaptive, and you can actually have multiple adaptive swarms out. I think you can easily maintain around 2. I think you can easily maintain, you can see it right now I have 2 on the frames. Now I've tested adaptive swarm with photosynthesis. It doesn't seem to be working. I mean, it would be pretty OP if it did work with it. It would be pretty crazy. I did test out different legendaries. So there's a legendary that your Swiftman no longer consumes a heal over time effect, but it extends the duration. This legendary does not work with Adaptive Swarm. It doesn't extend the duration of it. So there are, like, you know, so there are certain things that don't work. Like, I mean, it probably would be too overpowered anyway. So I'm gonna Swiftman into Wild Growth. I haven't really showcased the DPS. So I'm testing out Kitty Weaving. Nothing has really changed with Kitty Weaving. Again, there is a chance that Balance Affinity might be the way to go. That is still a chance of that. So that would be very interesting, actually. You have to keep in mind the major things that change with Feral Affinity. You gain Maim, and with Balance Affinity you have Typhoon. So you don't have Typhoon baseline. You have to go into Balance Affinity to get it. But you have Maim. So what Maim is going to do, if you build up combat points, you can kind of just stun the person. Again, my keybind wasn't really working here. And you also have Heart of the Wild as a talent. So I'll show it to you after this because I feel this is going to be a pretty healing intensive pull. So we're gonna go into Swiftman and Soul of the Forest Wild Growth. We're gonna put Adaptive Swarm. I keep forgetting to use Adaptive Swarm again. I should put Lifebloom on myself, Lifebloom on the tank. Very important to keep Lifebloom on yourself with photosynthesis during these AoE situations. Very important for the increased or faster heals. like I mentioned before, the Lifebloom legendary works with photosynthesis. I don't know if it's intended. I don't think it's gonna... I'm not 100% sure if it's going to make it into a live service like this, because it makes the legendary pretty strong in my eyes at least. I should put Adaptive Swarm. You can put Adaptive Swarm on an enemy target as well, and it will jump. Again, I have to mention Adaptive Swarm. I did kind of read it, but deals shadow damage over 12 seconds to the target, increases the effectiveness of your periodic effects on them by 20%. So your damage, your dots, and your hearts. So it's pretty OP. So I'm gonna use my Heart of the Wild. I'm gonna go into kitty form, and that's going to increase my kitty form damage. I should DPS here. So you can see it lasts for a really long time. I still have 30 seconds on it. And I can put Adaptive Swarm as well on the target. And we can go back to kitty weaving. There is no conjurants. There is 0 conjurants for Resto Druids. Absolutely no conjurants right now. So, again, there is going to be some really interesting potency conjurants that were for Resto Shaman, and you don't have anything that's right now with Resto Druid. So you have to keep in mind that there is a lot of things to come and possibly new synergies appearing. So that's a big kind of... you know, we're still not sure how that's gonna work. I think the Boom can pull this with Starfall. We have to see how that's gonna go. But generally speaking, the double Lifebloom build has been very interesting, and Adaptive Swarm generally has been really good. Again, I'm very bad about using Adaptive Swarm. I should use it on literally on cooldown, and I could maintain a few charges of Adaptive Swarm, and my Adaptive Swarm would also help my periodic heals as well. So you can see how the synergy between Adaptive Swarm, the synergy between... like, right now I feel Necrolords are looking pretty good. I'm not quite certain about the other testing that I'm going to do on Resto Druid. But the healing and the DPS... Again, the DPS is really interesting as well, because, okay, I'm going to put Adaptive Swarm on the tank, on the target. I'm going to put my Rips. I'm gonna do DPS. Again, you have to keep in mind, Heart of the Wild has a really, really long cooldown. It's around 5 minutes. But there's also a second legendary. There's also another legendary that increases the effect of your Feral Affinity, your Balance Affinity, and things like that. And when you shift into your Affinity form, you gain Heart of the Wild for 15 seconds. So that's insane. So that means with that legendary, you're going to have Heart of the Wild every 1 minute, and your DPS is going to be boosted, whether you're going to be Balance Affinity, whether you're going to be Feral Affinity. Again, Guardian Affinity is probably going to be there mainly for defensives. Do we need to soak this? It feels like we might. Oh, I'm also using... and I should be trying it out a bit more, Nourish. So you can have an option of using Nourish instead of Abundance. So Nourish is going to be an additional spot healing tool that you can use. It is basically a heal that's longer than Regrowth. That takes longer to cast. It costs less mana, but it benefits more from your mastery. So generally speaking, it is kind of like a longer heal that's gonna heal for more if you have more HOTS on people. I don't know. I'm honestly not 100% certain on this. I'm not 100% certain on Nourish at this point, because quite frankly, I'm not sure if you need 2 spot healing abilities. I feel like if you get Abundance and you make Regrowth stronger, you have to remember Regrowth also puts a HOT on person. I don't know if you need 2 spot healing spells for Resto Druid. Maybe it's going to be more fun and more worthwhile to just boost 1 spot healing heal and see how that goes. Again, like I mentioned, Swiftmend is really... I always misplay Swiftmend. It's really hard to get used to. Probably the hardest thing that I have to get used to right now is using Swiftmend and making sure that that person actually has a HOT on it. So in order to Swiftmend the target, you will need... the person will need to have... they will need to have Wild Growth, Regrowth, or Rejuvenation on them. So if the person has Lifebloom, it's not going to work. So you can sometimes get confused about what's the best way of doing it. and misplayed and not put Swiftmend on them, and then your Soul of the Forest gets misplayed and things like that. So let's use Adaptive Swarm on the target. I need to kite this in the pillar from what I remember, that's right. I have Heart of the Wild, but I'm scared to use it. There you go, I have Heart of the Wild, so let's do a bit of DPS. It's really hard for me to pay attention with this UI, it's been a while. I'm gonna put Lifebloom on the tank, there's too much damage happening right now. I'm gonna put Wild Growth, Adaptive Swarm on the boss. We don't have Efflorescence, we're using Spring Blossoms. It's definitely, Heart of the Wild is such a long duration that I feel like if you tell your raid group or a fireman group that, hey guys, do I have 40 seconds or so to do a full DPS, are you going to be fine? And you go ham into DPS, and I'm sure the DPS you could do would be pretty substantial. Like for example, right now if you go to Feral Affinity, or if you go to Heart of the Wild, Feral, damage of your Feral abilities increased by 30%, and critical strike with attacks that generate combo points generate an additional combo point. So it has different functionalities for different affinities. If I picked Balance Affinity, Heart of the Wild would do different things for balance. So it's very interesting how that works. Like I also mentioned that there is a legendary that also directly gives you Heart of the Wild every 1 minute, which I feel could also be very interesting. At the moment right now, we're not sure how many legendaries you can equip. Blizzard has mentioned that you might be able to equip 2 legendaries later down the line. So if you're able to equip 2 legendaries, let's say for example, if you're a Resto Druid right now, let's say for example, the legendary that I'm using right now that gives you 2 Lifeblooms is going to work with photosynthesis. Like right now it works, but I'm not sure if it will in the future. Let's say it does. Equipping the Heart of the Wild legendary could be very interesting as well for DPS. So that means you have a Resto Druid who has really strong single target healing, or a way to boost single target healing through Lifebloom and photosynthesis, a way to boost AoE healing through, again, photosynthesis placing on yourself, and then you have a lot of different ways to increase your damage. It's going to be very interesting. I completely forgot. You also have Nature Swiftness. I completely forgot to mention this. Nature Swiftness is going to make your next Regrowth, Rebirth, or Entangle Roots instant, castable in all forms, and heal for an additional 100%. So if a tank is about to die, like for example right now, let's go. Nature Swiftness into Regrowth. You have to remember that the person here didn't really have a lot of HUDs. My master didn't really stack a lot, so it wasn't doing a whole lot of damage. But again, Nature Swiftness, 1 minute cooldown, really short. Really short right now. Gives you boost in healing, or gives you boost in spot healing if you really need it. Besides that, what other abilities do we have? There's not a whole lot of happening. I mean, you do have Cyclone, which has the possibility of being really strong during weeks like bolstering. I feel like Cyclone is gonna have a lot of cheesability factor, but I didn't really use it right now, but definitely looks very interesting. So generally speaking, if you really look at what Resto Druid is gaining and losing, it feels like the legendaries that they're gaining are really strong. Again, I didn't really test out the Swiftman legendary. It didn't really work with Adaptive Swarm. I didn't use Adaptive Swarm at all, or I was really bad about using Adaptive Swarm. I'm still not quite sure about Nourish, whether we need 2 spot healing abilities. Maybe it's gonna scale really well with a lot of master and things like that. It's going to be super efficient. Maybe it's going to be the efficient slow heal, but I do feel the difference between Regrowth and is not too big. Photosynthesis with the legendaries works really cool, and we don't have Conjurants. Right now to play with, so there could be even more synergies. Overall, I feel like not a lot has changed for Resto Druids. They haven't really lost anything. They've gained a lot in terms of legendaries. They've gained a lot in terms of certain utilities. There has been like, you know, Typhoon only available with Balance Affinity. We'll see if Balance Affinity is going to be the best. We'll see if Feral Affinity is going to be the best. That's going to be very interesting. But again, I just don't see how Resto Druid is not going to be really strong in Mythic Plus unless they're going to change the way that the mastery works or maybe really nerf certain legendaries.